Well, kids, thanks for being here on my birthday.
We got you a mussel cake made out of Gala provincialis.
That's very nice, but I don't actually like that mussel. Back in the old days, we preferred atra cakes.
Tell us a story about the great mussel invasion.
Oh, well, kids, let me take you back to the 1970s. When I was just a small whelkling like yourself, the only rations available were the mussel species of Aatra, the ribbed mussel, and the C. meridionalis, until the late 70s when they came. Gala provincialis, or the Mediterranean mussel, invaded our shores here in the South African coast. They reproduced at an astonishing speed and grew faster than the native mussels that we so loved. For a while, we stuck to consuming the native ribbed mussel, but as time progressed and the Mediterranean mussel grew and invaded all the native mussel habitats, most of the whelks switched to feeding on the new mussel. Here I will introduce my scientist friend, Dr. Leo, to tell us more about an investigation into the effects that these mussels have on our prey choice.
Oh, hello there. I'm here to tell you about the methods carried out by some scientists investigating the mussel invasion in 2014.
They first carried out some surveys on the abundance of various mussel types around Marcus Island, South Africa, and then used quadrats to measure the abundance of the mussels and hand-collected native mussel species, Atra, invasive species such as the Mediterranean mussel and other recent invasive species as Algasis or the Pacific mussel, and some whelks. These invasive mussels could have emigrated here by ballast water. We starved the whelks to make them hungry for the experiment. We then presented an individual whelk with one mussel type and measured the number of mussel prey species consumed. More of the two invasive species were consumed than the native ribbed mussel. Significantly more invasive mussels were consumed than the native ones, and far more Mediterranean mussels were consumed over the Pacific mussel. Here's a graph I prepared earlier. If you draw your attention to the top left graph, the number of invasive species consumed was more than triple that to the native species. We then gave the whelks a choice between all three mussel species. When given the choice, the whelks consumed considerably more of the Mediterranean and Pacific mussels than the ribbed species, which supports our first experiment. We then investigated if the whelks made a prey choice based on the chemical signals from the mussel species. A Y maze was created with two different mussel species at the two ends and the whelk at one end. This found that there was no significant patterns in the choice of the whelk, indicating that the chemical signals had no effect on whelk choice. We considered that these mussel species actually have similar chemical signals, which may explain why the whelks have no preference. We then investigated the position of entry points and boreholes made by the whelks. We measured the diameter of the boreholes and the location of the hole on the mussel, as well as the nutritional value of each species. In the invasive species, whelks tended to bore into the center of the right valves. However, in the native species, there was no significant location of the boreholes. There was also no significant difference in nutritional value or thickness and diameter of the shell. We found that whelks consume the invasive mussels faster than the ribbed mussel. This could possibly be due to the ribbed nature of the shell on this native mussel, which could have made it harder to identify the thinnest area of the shell. Due to the high abundance of the invasive mussel species, they have become the predominant food source for the whelks. And although the whelks will still consume their native species, the invasive species have become so predominant in the habitat that the whelks are now choosing them as their most preferred type of food. Back to you, Grandpappy Whelk. Thank you very much, Dr. Leo. You're welcome.
Yay!
So kids, as you can see, the invasion of the mussels changed life as we know it here on the shores of South Africa. Despite having the invasive species, I can still consume some of the native mussel species, and the invasion of the Mediterranean mussel has definitely impacted my favorite ribbed mussel.
But Mediterranean mussels are so tasty.
And we're helping reduce their populations and allow the native species to flourish.
We had to adapt, and it was a time of immense change, and the native ribbed mussel species are still struggling. Always remember the great mussel invasion. Bloop.
Okay, go.
Due to the high... Okay, come back. There we begin. Due to the high abundance of the invasive mussel species,
Leo!
they have become the predominant food source for the whelks. Although they will consume the native mussel species, the whelks have been... The whelks have begun to prefer them as... You see, it's weird to like come down.
Just come down.
Don't cover this, but like, lean on this side.
Just
of it,
casually
yeah.
lean.
Yeah, but it's
Wait, and you're still talking to me. You're still
yeah,
talking to me.
When you finish, you then turn to me. So keep
Wait, talk to me. And then just turn and say back to you.
Oh, so then I'm like, so I come here for such a long time, right? That the whelks simply improve them as being a source. Back to you.
Yes.